Thank you. That's cute. Huh, that's the first time we've heard that. Anyway, okay, so after matter emerges from inconscient energy, when the time is right, life emerges from matter, seemingly out of nowhere. Modern science is at a complete loss to explain this transition from the inconscient to the subconscient. That's another term that's unique to Aurobindo. So number 17, how about Lisa?
Life takes hold of matter and breathes into it the numberless figures of its abundant creative force, its subtle and variable patterns, its enthusiasm of birth and death, and growth and act and response, its will of more and more complex organization of experience, its quivering search and feeling out after a self-consciousness of its own pleasure and pain and understanding gust of action.
So there's a
That's very
significant,
poetic language, isn't it?
yes, it is. There's a significant change in terms of the capacity when you switch from matter to life. And it has billions of different possibilities that appear from it. So I mean, unless you have a theory like involution, where all of those things are squeezed down into the inconscient at the beginning, how do you explain the development of these things? Where do they come from? Science will say it's all chance. But that's not a very satisfying response, I don't think. Anyway, so many eternities later, this dazzling display of creativity, the appearance of life, is supplemented by the emergence of mind, which seizes on life to make it an instrument for the wonders of will and intelligence. Beyond this development, the soul possesses and lifts mind through the attraction of beauty and good and wisdom and greatness toward the joy of some half-seen ideal highest existence, which is where we probably are at the moment. Okay, Bill Kelly, how about number 18?
Consciousness in life, throwing off the primal insensibility of a material inanimation and nescience, labors to find itself more and more entirely in the ignorance which is first inevitable formulation, but it achieves at first only a primary mental perception and a vital awareness of self and things, a life perception which in its first forms depends on an internal sensation responsive to the contacts of other life and of matter. Consciousness labors to manifest as best it can through the inadequacy of sensation its own inherent delight of being, but it can only formulate a partial pain and pleasure. In man, the energizing consciousness appears as mind, more clearly aware of itself and things. This is still a partial and limited, not an integral power of itself, but a first conceptive potentiality and promise of integral emergence is visible. That integral emergence is the goal of evolving nature.
So where human beings are most of the time is at the level of mind. And of course, there are many, many levels of mind, but it suggests that there's more available. We always have that feeling of a yearning of more, of higher. We're attracted to it. It's alluring. And so we're actually being drawn by the force of evolution, which is, in his view, an attempt of that consciousness that was built into the inconscient to express itself more and more fully in more and more in larger circles of concern, shall we say. Yeah. So, as you can see from this last passage that Bill read, the philosophical language that Aurobindo uses, especially in the Life Divine, to describe this creative process is lofty, lengthy, and rather complex. To convey it rather more succinctly, I'm going to refer to Wilber's most recent book. It's important to know that Wilber bases much of his own evolutionary philosophy on Aurobindo's writings. Okay, so let's switch gears. I think you'll find this a little easier to follow. Okay, Joey, let's see if you agree. That's number 19.
According to most of the spiritual traditions, East and West, spirit has a dual movement with relation to the manifest world. The creation of the manifest world occurs by, to use the terminology of the Christian version of the Great Chain, spirit is going out of itself, stepping down and reducing itself to a lesser version of itself called the soul. Then the soul itself sediments or condenses and again steps down and contracts to create a lesser version of itself, the mind. Then the mind likewise condenses, crystallizes, and contracts into a lesser version of itself, the living body. Finally, the living body sediments and or condenses downward into the lowest, densest, insentient, lifeless version, matter, or the physical realm, where matter here means not the exteriorest of all levels, but the lowest of all levels. Ken Wilber, The Religion of Tomorrow.
So that's the text that I'll be using as the basis of most of what I have to say in part 3. It's his most recent statement of his thinking, 750 pages or so.
Mark,
Anyway.
it might be useful to think of this evolution or devolution, whether you're looking from the point of view of ascent or descent in terms of vibration.
That's another way to see it.
That may help us also to understand that the mountain is vibrating, but it's vibrating at a very, very slow, almost a flat line.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go up the arc of ascent, the energetic force starts to increase exponentially. But even that isn't true because, as Sergei knows, or the particle physicists know, that when they've looked at the microcosmic world, there's all kinds of jumping around and motions and interactions and movement and so on and so forth. So it's kind of paradoxical. So it's only just one way to think of it, that as we go up the arc of ascent, the energetic life force begins to vibrate much faster.
Yeah, I agree. That's a wonderful way of saying it, Jack. Okay, so now let's take a look at the arc of descent. So this self-limiting of consciousness clearly corresponds to the arc of descent in Islam and the Baha'i faith. Aurobindo and Wilber both emphasize the presence of spirit through all these increasingly limited levels. Okay, so who have we got on tap here? Danielle, could you read number 20 for us?
Yes. So all of these realms are versions of spirit. There is spirit as spirit, spirit as soul, spirit as mind, spirit as body, and spirit as matter. Each level is simply a reduced version of spirit, with less consciousness, less being, less spirit, but all being spirit nonetheless. To use the wooden ladder analogy, spirit is both the highest level or rung on the ladder, its transcendental dimension, and the wood out of which the entire ladder is made, its immanent dimension. This entire movement outward and downward to create a universe is called involution. Plotinus referred to it as efflux, the superabundant overflow and outpouring of spirit. Ken Wilber.
Well, that gives you a little sense of the history of these ideas. That Plotinus, what was his date? He was in the 200 AD period, I think. Very famous philosopher, was thinking of it as reflux and efflux. So the great chain of being is a way that the world understood evolution before it became evolution, before it was known by that term. And it was used for at least 1,000 years. Each step downwards means a step down from perfect consciousness into greater and greater stages of unconsciousness. As spirit steps down into soul, it forgets that it is spirit and only recognizes soul. The same is true as soul steps down into mind, now only recognizing mind. Similarly, the body forgets mind and matter forgets body. This final step leads to the Big Bang, which produces a universe of nothing but lowest level matter, with all the higher levels being forgotten, unconscious, and unmanifest. The key point, according to both Aurobindo and Wilber, is that all these higher levels exist within the confines of lowest level matter as unconscious potentials of the universe. Okay. Oh, let me see who we got here. Jack, we turn to you for number 21. Now
Okay,
we're
so
going back up.
once the material world blows into existence through the Big Bang, which is the result of the overall involution efflux movement, then the entire process begins to reverse itself. The reverse movement of matter back to spirit is called evolution or evolution. Plotinus referred to it as the reflux, the return of spirit to spirit as spirit. Ken Wilber, The Religion of Tomorrow, page 148.
Oh, Mark, I wonder
Yes,
if
sir.
I could throw something in.
Sure.
The word evolution, it comes from the French origin, meaning to unfold, to unfold. Now,
Okay.
that means something was packed in.
Yeah.
I think it's consistent with what we're talking about. Evolution, if it means unfolding, it means the appearance of something that has been packed in, or you could say made dense within it.
Mhm.
So anyway, I find evolution as unfolding fits with this Plotinus, Aurobindo, Wilber model of evolution.
It does.
So
Thank
the
you for
things
that.
that are coming out have been put in there. That explains why they're coming out.
That's right.
Anyway, I gotta go. I'll join you next week. Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
Bye, Harold.
Right.
Okay, Mark, does that mean that he's saying that consciousness is inherent in the Big Bang? Is that what's potentially there?
I don't see how he could say no to that.
It's just, it's packed in, but it hasn't unfolded yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Think of a black hole that sucks everything down into itself. That's the initial stage, right? So, having hidden itself in the inconscient, spirit or consciousness slowly but surely begins to act upon the materials available to it in its new home. Thus begins the process of evolution, which Muslims as well as Baha'is know as the Arc of Ascent. Okay, so number 22 would be Peter Manier.
I don't see Peter here, Mark.
Oh, did he leave?
We've
Okay, he
lost
was here
Peter.
earlier.
Yeah.
That's okay. How about Zilda then?
Okay. In
22.
evolution or reflux, each successively higher level emerges from or through the previous lower level, and thus appears as a significant leap forward, often hard to explain. Out of matter, living bodies emerged. How did that happen? Then out of living bodies, minds emerged. How?
Mhm. Science has no explanation for that as far as I know, other than just chance. Aurobindo then asks the critical question, what's next? The answer, which he spent more than half his life investigating and attempting to make manifest, is the supermind. He claims that this will result in the life divine. Human beings consider themselves to be the pinnacle of evolution. We are each living in a body created of matter, energized by life, and gifted with more or less powerful minds. Our possession of rational thought is that which distinguishes us from other mammals. And yet we are far from content with our present stage of development. The vast majority of human beings experience a sense of separation from their surroundings. They are limited by 5 physical senses in terms of the quantity and quality of information they can access. Hangame, are you still online?
Yes.
How about reading number 23 for us, please?
We are not only what we know of ourselves, but an immense more which we do not know. Our momentary personality is only a bubble on the ocean of our existence.
So, to illustrate this point, think of where human beings are, or what human beings are able to see on the spectrum of light. I have a little graphic here for you. So there, in the top part of this diagram, you have a very small colored section in the middle, which has been blown up in this lower section. So that's the visible light that we can see. Look at all the types of light to the right and to the left that we are incapable of seeing. This is all going on at the same time, but we have no way of perceiving it,
Mark,
except that we build machines that can pick it up. Sergey, you can tell me more about this.
well, you just answered it yourself. We have machines to perceive it. Like otherwise, we wouldn't have known about the existence.
Yeah.
So we do see it.
So we have mechanical means that extend our perceptions, if you like. Otherwise, we would be limited to that tiny little section in the middle. What, you're going to say something further?
No, I have a few things to say. I can leave it till the end of the discussion, but that's fine.
Okay.
Just one point I wanted to make though, like when you say that science has no answer, I'd like to defend science. Science does not answer the question why. This is not the question science is meant to answer, especially physics that you're like referring to very often.
Right.
Physics answers the question how. It doesn't answer the question why this is happening. It's not in its realm.
Okay.
So we should not blame it for not answering questions that it's not designed to answer.
Fair enough. Yeah,
That's why we need religion.
that's,
Thank you, Jack.
so here's the audio spectrum. And again, there's lots in the supersonic side of things and in the subsonic to the left of the screen here. So the point being that, you know, even when you're paying attention, you're only seeing a tiny portion of what's available in terms of the information that is being thrown your way in physical reality.
Nice diagrams, Mark. It helps to see those things, you know?
Mhm. So this number 24 is a repetition. We saw this in a previous class. That's a short one. Is Sylvie still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, good.
Number 24,
Yes, please.
the crown and dome of a temple, jutting out from the waves while the great body of the building is submerged under the surface of the waters.
So we believe that we are a single being, a unitary, the panorama of selves housed within our own bodies. Okay, Mary, are you available?
Thanks a lot, Jack. Thanks a lot, Mark. I'm a little bit tired. Can I
Okay.
pass to somebody?
Sure,
Thank you.
sure. No
Thank you.
problem. Is David Ocon still?
No, they had to leave at 9 o'clock.
Ah, okay. All right, Linda O'Neill. It's up to you, number 25.
Men do not know themselves and have not learned to distinguish the different parts of their being, for these are usually lumped together by them as mind, because it is through a mentalized perception and understanding that they know or feel them. Therefore, they do not understand their own states and actions, or if at all, then only on the surface.
Those of us who become conscious of our psychological makeup to some extent can distinguish between our physical, emotional, and mental aspects. But these elements are quite mixed up in ordinary consciousness. Only as one becomes more conscious, usually as the result of a spiritual discipline, does one discover that one's psychological nature is complex, made up of several distinguishable parts of being.